I met the sisters first in 1975, and I was a first-year student nurse at that time, and I saw in the newspaper, Catholic newspaper, an advertisement for Come and See. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll give it a go, you know. And as a teenager, of course, and going into my nursing, I had what to do. You know, sometimes you want to, one day you want to get married, the next day you want to be sister, all of this, you know. I want to be a librarian, I want to be a teacher, all sorts, archaeologist. And then I decided I want to be a nurse. Best decision. And so I became a nurse in my first year training. And then I saw this advertisement. I thought, yes, because I felt called in that way. And so I went. I was the only one who went. And when I met the sisters in Melbourne, they were wonderful. And the first sister I ever met was Sister Renee. And she was director of nursing there. And I went in and I stayed with a weekend with them, and they were warm and friendly, and I thought, oh, I like this, you know. And so for the next 2.5 years we kept in touch. I'd come for the weekend at different times and like that, you know. It's sort of how I met them. Then in it's a long time ago now, 1978 I went to the United States and started my novitiate and in Philadelphia. So I was there for the next 4.5 years. And after I made my novitiate in 1980, I went to New York and worked at Cabrini Medical Center as a nurse. It was really a great experience. Mm.
Okay, and so you told us how you met the MSCs. Why do you think that you entered the Institute?
It was, you know how you have a sense of looking for something, you know, and I had always been, you know, going to church, and I'd been in government schools and Catholic schools, so I had a variety. I didn't really know any sisters, not as an adult certainly, or even a late teenager. So I think there was a bit the romantic view, you know, the nun story and all of that sort of thing. And but I felt drawn, you know, and I went to church, and a lot of influence, I think, from my sisters. When I had 2 older sisters, and the second one, she joined the convent when I was 15, and she was joined a Polish order, and but she only stayed 1 year. But it influenced me a lot, you know. And the superior of the house, she was wonderful, and she'd give me advice, and she'd say, "Wait, you're too young," and all that. But it was really good. That helped. Influenced it quite a bit, and she gave me things to read, and so yeah, I've always felt this thing of wanting to serve, you know, especially because I had decided to be a nurse, and I wanted to serve people. I didn't, as I said, didn't know any sisters really, except some teaching ones from when I was at school, but I didn't want to be a teacher. So when I saw this advertisement for the Cabrini sisters at Cabrini Hospital in Melbourne, I thought, oh, hospital healthcare. So that's when I went, you know. And what I liked about them was the fact that the Sacred Heart, because I had devotion to the Sacred Heart, and then also because they were missionary, and I wanted to be missionary. And I just felt this being drawn to be a missionary. And then it just went on from there, you know. I think growing up my father was in the Australian Army, and we travelled places, we went here, and so I had this itinerant since I was young. So it was being missionary. I wanted. Mm.
Thank you. So this is a tough one for you.
Uh-oh.
Okay, if you can give us a brief history of where you've lived and worked and done.
I'll try to be brief, yeah. A long story there. When I went, after finishing novitiate in Cabrini Medical Center for a year and a half, I went back to Australia. I worked in the hospital in Australia for about 4 years, I think it was then. And I did some study at that time too, coronary care nursing. And then Sister Regina Casey, who was Superior General, she said, "You're going to be a missionary, you better go on a mission, you know, a foreign mission." So she sent me to Swaziland. So I was there for 16 months, and then I went back through the US for a few months, prepare for final vows. So I made final vows at the beginning of 1987. And then I went back to, I was in Australia. So I continued working there at the hospital and to do midwifery. In 89, 90, I did midwifery. We were going through there was a bit of difficulties in in community personally at that time. And then as I finished midwifery, I actually left the institute at that time. It was a very difficult decision. And I didn't want to leave, but it had to be. And as God works out, all things work together for good. And then, so after that, I was out, and the sisters kept in touch with me. They were wonderful, you know. And I went, I studied overseas. I went to Taiwan. I did a master's in Asian studies, that sort of thing. And then in 1998, 97, I started a first Red Cross mission in Kenya. And so over the next 15 years, I went to 9 countries. Myanmar, South Sudan, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, the Philippines, Israel, the West Bank, Palestine. It was a wonderful time. But in between missions, I would work at Cabrini. And even after I left, working at Cabrini, people were wonderful, accepting, loving. And even the sisters, because at that time, Sister Regina Casey moved to Australia, you know, and she was there with Sister Irma and a couple of the other sisters. But they're always warm and inviting, and before mission they'd invite me to come for dinner. After mission, they were really good.
So now let's go back a little bit. You enter the institute. Did you understand the charism? What did you understand of the charism?
I did understand it in a sense once I got to know the sisters, you know, because devotion to Sacred Heart is very well known, of course. And I realized the charism was about being a presence of love. And I found that, especially because I was those few years in America working in the missions there and with the sisters, and I experienced that love and I saw it in practice, you know. And it was to be a loving presence to others, wherever we are, you know, in mission, wherever, even Afghanistan or places like that. So, yeah. But it was wonderful. And the example of Mother Cabrini herself, wonderful woman, you know, and sort of that was weaved together with her love of the Sacred Heart. It was just wonderful, you know, her passion, her get up and go, and she was also, I like her, she was very common sense and businesswoman and clever and clear and loving at the same time.
Okay, so now it's later in your time with the Institute. Mm-hmm. How does charism speak to you now?
A little bit the same, really, the same thing, because I remember when it was the process of, you know, when I was out of the congregation and coming back in. It was quite a long time after all that. And to come back in was it was a good, easy decision in one way, because God kept annoying me and kept telling me something. I'm like, how can I do this? How can I go back? I left, you know, and all of this. But slowly, it sort of came clear. I think He got louder. I was not paying attention because I knew I'd have to change my life, and I didn't really want to at that stage. And, you know, because it was a good life I had, all the work I did and everything. But when I finally took the plunge and asked, Sister Patricia was the Superior General at the time, and I finally wrote to her under the, you know, sort of recommendation of Sister Bernadette, because I'd been confiding in her. And then I received such a loving letter. It was just beautiful, you know. And, now I'll start to cry. So it was so wonderful. And it took, I was in the Philippines at this time, you know, with Red Cross. And so then I actually went to see her. I had some time off from the Philippines, and I went to see her. And it was she was so welcoming. And then later, when I was, I'd finished, I had to tell my family after that, but they were not surprised at all. But so then when I finished my mission in Red Cross, and I remember being an assembly in New York, and Sister Pietrina told the sisters, you know, they were you've no idea. It was beautiful. And, sorry. it was so wonderful and so loving, accepting. And that's what I see with the sisters, in the mission, in our life, the warmth and accepting of all of our differences. I love it.
Do you want to take a minute? Would you like a clean tissue?
I do have one.
You have one?
No, it's all right.
All right, you're doing great. You're doing great. Thank you. I'm so glad you're talking to us like this. So you've had experiences in community and out of community, I assume. Can you tell us what it's like to live in community?
Living in community has its challenges, that's for sure. And it also is wonderful. I remember when I was out of the community, it's one thing I missed. Not that I missed everybody, of course, but I missed the community. I missed the common prayer together. Even though my life was good, but I missed that. And so I find that's an ongoing thing, a support of one another when you have difficulties. We have space when we need to, but we have shoulders to cry on, people to help us, support us, to pray together, to brainstorm with each other, all sorts of things. When things are difficult in our works, and you don't know what to do, and sometimes I don't know what to do in some situations, and my sisters help me. We help one another, yeah.
In your life as a sister, what is the most profound, life-changing experience? Is there something that touched your heart deeply?
It is a bit difficult, that, really, because God's been very present in many ways. Some very subtle sometimes, and very strong in other ways, because I'm so slow to pick up the signposts, So it was more, I think, being with a sister. When I became a CLM at some point, because I really wanted that connection with the sisters, and I didn't think possible. And Sister Bernadette Anello, she recommended this, and I remember the time she told me. She was in the Philippines, I was down the south, she was up the north, and she told me, and my heart leapt. I could feel it, and I was like, so I did, and I became a CLM, and it was wonderful, and it really helped me go ahead, And then that's why after a couple of years, it wasn't enough though. Even though I had this new community of CLMs, they were terrific. And I was mixing with the sisters more, and I loved it, I really did. And but it wasn't enough after that. And then God kept pushing a bit more, and that's where I am today.
You finally paid attention.
I did. I did.
So what? How would you describe? I mean, I know you say you're an organizer, but how would you describe your current ministry?
When I came back in, Sister Patricia asked me to go to Ethiopia, and which I thought maybe, and I said, yep, I will go. I had already been there with Red Cross, So then I went down the countryside to run the hospital. First preparing to re-enter that part of it. And then they asked me after a year or so to take the hospital, which was really good, because I like hospitals. Being a nurse, I actually like them. But it was very challenging, And after, a few years, I handed over to Bongani, who's doing now. And as we became a new region, we also needed a secretary, treasurer. And Sister Diane was always wanting me to help, and I was on the council already, and she was asking me to help and do this and do that. Anyway, and we need to have a newsletter, we need to have this. And so when I was able to give up the hospital, I became the regional secretary and treasurer, which I love, So, and it's, many things. It's variety. It's serving the sisters, helping the sisters on their mission. I do a lot of that, I'm also a bit the travel agent as well.
So if you look back on your history, what would you say to someone who's considering coming into the Institute?
Mostly I'd say that you need to first to pray on it, but to speak with someone who can help you, someone who's mature, really common sense, someone to help and guide, because it's not easy. And to find the right way, the right path. Because God wants us to be happy. He doesn't want you to join the convent because your mother wants you or there's nothing else to do. He wants it because for your happiness. Because maybe your happiness is another way. So when the women are coming in, it's to say they're interested. We have to go through discernment. You know, when you come in the door, you haven't joined yet. It's a process. We have to be open to the process of seeing what is God telling me in my heart. And sometimes it's only when you're away from your normal situation, when you're in a time of prayer and discernment and being with the sisters and experiencing the mission, that you come to know more deeply, this is for me or it's not for me. You know, it comes clear after time. The thing is to be patient. We're young people, including myself when I was young, always want to, now, it's like you're impatient for things to happen, but we need patience because God is patient with us.
So this is a slightly different question, but in a way the same. And in the U.S. we call this an elevator speech.
Oh yeah.
So now you've met a woman who's considering the religious life in general.
Yeah.
What would you say to her?
Yeah, come and join us. Really, it's great. But I would just say that as missionary sisters, can only say for them to come and to work on the mission to serve God in this way of loving, of being helping and sharing with people. That is wonderful, challenging, but wonderful. Yeah. So, and we're together. We do many things. We do great things for God.
Thank you.
And Mother Cabrini is very wonderful too.
Is there any advice that you'd give to a young woman who's considering the religious life?
To speak to somebody, that's with the most advice. Before, speak to a sister. Go and speak to sisters. Ask them, not to be afraid. Ask them, what is it like, Because many have no idea. They watch you see on television stories and it may not be, it's not real sometimes. So it's just to go and talk to them. Ask to visit, ask to stay.
How do you think telling these stories that we're doing now of sisters or sisters telling their stories, how do you think that might impact someone considering a religious life?
I think some people who, if they've got an interest, they would be impressed. I mean, I've seen some of them now, and they make me laugh and they make me cry. They're beautiful, so I think it would be nice for them to see. Especially the older sisters, the younger sisters, it'll be wonderful. And because I'm sure we'll see all the common threads, through it.
I know that's what I see. So what do you think are the greatest strengths of the Institute?
Greatest strengths would be ourselves together, and the history, and not history, but having Mother Cabrini, because she's a great role model, a mentor. She lived in another century, of course, but from her we learn so much. And we are so lucky because we have all these writings of hers, her letters, all the travels, all this other. So it's great nourishment, But our great strength is our unity. It doesn't always feel like that sometimes, but we are still connected with each other. And that helps. Like when we had the 2017 anniversary of Mother Cabrini's death in Chicago, it was so wonderful to see all the sisters there. And, many of them we know from different meetings or something, and ones you don't know, you meet them first time, and it was just wonderful feeling. So.
Okay, and at this point, in the history, what do you think is the greatest need of the Institute?
More young women, and not so young, to join with us, to serve God in this way. We can all serve God in different ways, of course, whether it's lay or religious, but we missionary sisters, it's special, and God wants us to continue this work of loving others, being His love in the world.